Charles Spinoza reveals how to design a masterpiece business by addressing moral anomalies and setting new standards in leadership. Drawing examples from iconic leaders like Jeff Bezos, Anita Roddick, he shows how to create organizations that operationally are efficient and morally distinctive, which is super important these days, as many of you know. So tune in and stay tuned and learn how to lead with vision and integrity.
Welcome to the Lead Machine Growth Show, where you will discover how to tackle your tech, master your message, and design your dream. Paul Guyon, the mastermind behind the Lead Machine, introduces you to trailblazers who inspire you to implement life-changing solutions and systems you can model to nurture your leads and get your offers seen by your ideal clients who will invest in themselves and you. Be sure you visit our website at www.leadmachinegrowthshow.com. While you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now, tune in and get ready to transform your vision into reality.
Welcome to the Lead Machine Growth Show. I'm Paul Guyon, your host, lead machine coach, and founder of the Lead Machine Marketing Group and Mastermind, and I'm dedicated to helping you tackle your tech, master your message, and design your dream. So whether you're just starting out or looking to take your business to the next level, let's get this conversation started and turn your dreams into reality. So Charles Spinoza, thank you so much, sir, for coming today and joining me on a beautiful Saturday. And can you tell us a little bit why and how you got started, or why you made the decision to make morally distinctive businesses and help people do that? Because that's not something a lot of people talk about today. And I think it should be central to what we do.
Paul, thank you. Thank you, first of all, for inviting me to be on the show. And second, thank you for that wonderful opening question.
Yeah.
So I'd like to see just a little bit about my background and get into it. I've been a consultant for the last 27 years doing what management consultants do. And that is really mostly helping businesses find strategic positions that are distinctive that they can take advantage of. And I did even more of this, making them operationally efficient.
Yeah.
But my background before I became a consultant was actually as a professor in the humanities. I taught Shakespeare for a while at Miami University in Ohio. Then I taught philosophy actually at UC Berkeley and wrote a book on innovation from a philosopher's point of view. That's what got me into consulting. But I've always sort of seen leaders as people who are essentially writing novels, writing something. And that's how I analyzed where they were. But for years, I was focused, just as most consultants are, on operational efficiency. And I ran into a case about 8 years ago where I was working with a consultant, again, to help his field team be much more productive. I'm working with a manager, director, to help his field team be much more productive. And he said to me, Charles, I've got a problem. A few years ago, he works in the gas distribution industry. I have to keep all of this anonymous. He works in the gas distribution industry. He said, a few years ago, the worst thing that could possibly happen to anybody in my industry happened to me. There was a fire in a multi-story building where the gas ignited the fire. That was bad enough. That's considered the worst crisis. And then the turnoff valves we discovered were buried under meters of cement. And then we didn't have maps of turnoff valves further away. Huge city, huge problem. He got his team together. And this is a industry that really cares about risk and mitigating risk and having steps and steps and steps for everything. Got his team together and said, what, can we come up with something? Can we come up with an innovation? And as he tells the story, they did. I have a feeling he might have come up with it himself. But the idea was, I'm not going to speak as an engineer, so apologies to all the engineers in the audience. The solution was to put a balloon in the pipe, to put balloons in as many pipes as they thought they could leading into the building. And everybody said that might work, But if it doesn't, you're going to end up going to prison. And even if it does work, you're going to spend years and years and years defending the decision. He did it, it worked, and they were right. He was spending years and years defending the position. And he said, he asked me, while he was in the process of defending, should I have done it? And should I continue trying to innovate in my industry and my business?
Hmm.
And I realized at that point, and it was sort of late in my consulting career for me, this is what leaders really want to do. He wanted to turn his business into an innovative business. He wanted to take a stand that was the right thing, the morally right thing for the industry, and do it. And I said, absolutely, I will help you figure out a way to make that decision, stand by it, and see how we can transform the industry and get you through all the judicial hearings that you're going through. So in the background, I guided him. He was a brilliant leader. But what I realized is this is what most leaders I had been dealing with want to do. They have a sense of what the right thing to do for their industry is, and that can include for their customers, for their employees, for their suppliers, for their owners. And most of them follow the designs that they get from business schools or consultants of the sort I was. That's what they're told they're supposed to do. Either take care of stakeholders, take care of your shareholders. Here's the recipe. You do it well. That's what they're trained to do, and not set out on your own to have your own vision. Well, with this leader, I stood behind him. He now has robots going through all the gas distribution pipes all over his city. He has sniffer cars going around finding leaks before any human being could find the leaks. And he's constantly innovating and changing the industry. And he has made that, I want to say, into a more, well, it hasn't changed the industry yet, but he's made that into a moral good that people look at and say, wow, we could do that. He's in the middle of changing the industry. And that for me is a masterpiece. And a masterpiece, if I'm going on too long, Paul, just tell me. But I just want to say,
before we get into the masterpiece, I want to make an observation of what he was faced with, and what we encounter all the time is that the design of the process that we follow, like you said, this is what we're taught to do. It reminds me of the Space Odyssey 2001 movie by way back in the 70s when that came out. The open the pod bay doors, Hal. I can't do that, Dave. Now, there are so many businesses that have I can't do that, Dave, because it's policy, because it's this, it's because it's that. I can't do what's right because they won't let me. And the they are unaware. The they that made these rules are totally unaware. And if they knew that these things were happening, they would make one of two decisions. They say, yep, that's the way I want it because I don't have time. Or they say, we have to fix this. We have to fix this and make it right because our customers, our stakeholders, our owners, our vendors, our employees, everyone involved is not being treated for the common good. And or for the good of, sometimes it's for the good of the stakeholder, but it still needs to be for the common good. There's that moral compass that has to be in place. And a lot of times these processes that are being followed in the call centers and in the business and the line managers and at the people that are delivering the service or the systems that are delivering the service in the case of the gas, they have their orders and they have no autonomy to and I just unpacked a whole bunch of stuff. They don't have the autonomy to make any decisions, and so therefore their companies end up being mediocre. They're nowhere near a masterpiece, although they could be. So let's talk about the masterpiece.
Yeah, no, I want to, what you've hit on is something really, really important, Paul, because I think it's actually a little bit worse than you described it. And I'm a pretty optimistic guy, but people get set following their processes and procedures.
Yeah.
People actually love them. They really do.
They want to be told what to do.
They want to be told. A lot of people want to be order takers. That's hard news for some people to hear, but it simply is the case. I just wake up and walk around. You'll discover that. And even those that want to innovate, they love some of these policies and procedures. There are people who love being bureaucratic. Don't deny it. It's out there. And so when you talk about the autonomy, it is taking the risk. If you're going to change that, and I believe this happens up and down the hierarchy, you're going to have to take what I call a moral risk to change it. That's what the director that I was working with did. His entire team said, don't put those balloons in the pipes. If it doesn't work, we're in real trouble. And even if it works, we're in trouble.
They were already in trouble.
Yeah, and they were already, I mean, that was his point. A moral risk taker, he can see their lives being lost. He can see there are people being treated unfairly. He can see all of those things. And he or she, a lot of my moral risk takers and leaders are in fact women, are able to find the courage to resolve the issue in a way that goes against the rules. And they do go against the rules. Sometimes personal roles. Anita Roddick, to set up her second store, basically had to lie to her husband and go secure a loan against his advice. He was also the CFO. He went out of town and she went and did it on her own. She gave up half the shares of the company to get the money to turn it into a growth company. He came back from the trip. He stood behind her, and the success is success. But that kind of moral risk taking is what leaders have to do, and they have to do it because they find something morally anomalous. We have a fire; it's killing people. If I follow the rules, it's going to kill more people. If I take a chance, I might be able to stop that. Everybody says I shouldn't take that chance. That's an anomaly, and that's. So the kind of masterpieces I'm talking about are not just simply purpose-driven businesses. They're businesses where you see something going wrong in your industry or your organization, and you seek to correct it. And generally to do it, you have to do something that is considered breaking the rules or doing something that's terribly unwise.
Yeah.
And the amazing thing, Paul, I want to tell you is ever since I started doing this, focusing on masterpieces and creating masterpieces about 8 years ago, I don't think I've run into one leader that did not have an answer to my basic question, which is, what always goes wrong in your company or your industry? You would expect, this is playing off of what you said. If people, realized that something was going wrong, they'd fix it. Well, in fact, they work around it. They don't fix it. So I've had answers.
Exactly.
I've had answers like, we treat our loyal customers worse than we treat our new customers. That's something that goes wrong. You can
That's
see
because there's more profit in them because you've earned their trust and you've had to squeeze the margins to get the people that you really aren't your ideal customers, but you need to satisfy someone else who's counting the money.
Exactly. And you can see, if you're a consultant going into a company, you can say, you want to increase your profits? This is how you do it. And you can follow a recipe to do it, and your profits will go up. But leaders that I run it, they really find that wrong. Another one in the medical industry is there is so much information that's hidden from people and so much gaming of the information. When you go into a hospital, essentially you become a code. That's how the hospital gets paid. It gets paid on the basis of the way they code your case.
Right.
And that's sort of gamed. And you don't have a relationship with your doctor. It's the coder's relationship based on the medical report and the insurance company. That's where the business transaction is taking place. People game that. Stopping gaming that. That's something that always goes wrong.
You hit something right there that is close to home to me, because both of my parents and my brother were physicians, and they went to my mother and my father met in med school in the 40s, in the late 40s, and they married just before graduation. and they moved to Flint, Michigan, and they started a small practice. And from there, and they're both Catholics, faith-based, generous, morally, you know, and they faced moral decisions too. They had people that couldn't afford to get care, and they gave them care anyway, and they bartered with them. We had babysitters, we had handymen, we had all kinds of things like that. And they were aware of everything that you were taking, any medications. They were aware of your treatments. They were a one-stop thing. They were a one-stop shop. And that has morphed into code takers, like you say. And so, and my wife, who had a bad experience with the doctor and lost a child at an early age, she doesn't trust him. And with my treatments, and, you know, as I get older, we all have ailments. She goes, you're not on the right medication. We need to go and talk to someone else and seek someone else who's less interested in giving you this drug and more interested in saying, okay, is it your diet? Is it your environment? Is it your lifestyle? Is it all of these things? Are these supplements? Are you deficient here? You know, holistically looking at me as a person instead of as a number, and that's just a shame. And being the son of a physician, when I hear that, you know, I go, ugh, you know, but she's right. She's right.
Yeah, she's absolutely right. I'm going to say something a bit hopeful about that, but also the difference. My son is far wealthier than I am because my wife and I give gifts.
Yeah.
He goes to physicians in New York, the top physicians in New York City. It's basically cash on the barrelhead. It's not, they don't want to be bothered with insurance. And so he's an athlete and he has some injuries. And we're just paying the kind of treatment you get when it's you and the physician, you're paying the physician, or your parents are paying the physician. And the physician is looking at you as a person, taking care of you person, and trying to do the best thing for the money. It's a totally different experience from the one we normally get. I can say that because I'm an insurance guy. I go and so first of all, there's that. Another thing is a client that I can't talk about too much is working to bring us back to that simple kind of transactional medicine. It's an entrepreneurial client in the Bay Area. I just finished a gig with this client. They are doing some brilliant stuff. They are going to have to take some big moral risks over the next, because this flies in the face of insurance.
Yeah.
They're going to have to take some.
There's going to be a lot of pushback on that. But that's when Jeff Bezos said, sometimes you just have to be willing to be misunderstood.
Yes.
And that's what we're facing as entrepreneurs. Not everybody wants to be or is or can be an entrepreneur. And certainly those line workers who are following the menu of the day, they're not entrepreneurs. And that's okay. We need people that can execute. We need people, but we need to have better leadership.
Yeah, and I think leadership goes pretty far down. You're right. It's not the line workers, but I think every leader, and the leaders I work with, one of their jobs is to stretch their employees. And how far can you stretch each employee? That's a very moral question. And the answer is you take a risk. And sometimes you see an employee that has a huge amount of potential, and you're wondering whether you're pushing them too hard. But that's the moral risk any manager is taking. Now, that does not mean that you're going to transform your industry, but you might transform that person's life. And that's where moral risk taking starts. People ask me all the time, Charles, are you just writing about the leaders of huge divisions of companies and the CEOs of companies? Well, primarily that is what I'm focused on, because they can change a whole industry. They can change a whole organization. Yeah. But if they ask me, are the skills you're talking about strictly for them? The answer is no. If you own any, or if you run any part of your company that deals with customers or employees, and almost everybody does, there aren't so many single people, then you have relationships that you can transform right there. There are employees you can stretch. There are employees that you can take care of in other ways. And all of that involves moral thinking. What is right? It involves moral imagination. How does this person see the world? What's an alternative way to see the world that might be better for both of us? Those are the kinds of questions that I want leaders to ask all the way up and down.
And those are difficult questions to answer too. And some may be unwilling. Some people who have potential that are being led. What are some of the ways that you overcome some of that pushback that people may not be willing to take that coaching?
Pushback well, look, this goes back to my university days. Some people are going to be unwilling to take that coaching. Some people really love following the letter of the law strictly, and to simply find a place for them to do it. But
and change the law,
or change the law, right? But or change the rules in this case.
Yeah.
But I find that the problem I find is not that there are people that you just can't work with that way. I find rather there are people who are seeking, we sort of call it mentorship a lot.
Mm-hmm.
They're seeking mentors who will stretch them, and they want to be stretched. And the real deficit is the courage of the mentors. More than, am I going to be breaking a rule? Am I going to be violating some bit of labor law if I push the person here or there, or tell them to make this political decision, or so go say this unpopular thing to that senior person? That's where I find the deficit. We don't certainly have to have everybody getting stretched that way, but for me, it's sort of heartbreaking when there are people who really want to do better, lead richer lives, do better stuff for the company, and they're just passed over because it takes too much courage. It
does take courage, and sometimes you have to be willing to be misunderstood, like Jeff Bezos said. And as an employee, you may lose your job over it.
Yes, exactly. That is the willingness to be misunderstood. That's the risk you're taking.
Yeah.
But you're taking it again because you see what you believe is the right way to do things that will make the world a better place. And I want to say something about, if you don't mind, about what I mean by the right way to do things. Because when people hear the word moral, they generally think of the rules we have for getting along with each other. Mm-hmm. And we want them to be fair and equal. People treating each other as equally. And I only consider that half of what I mean when I mean moral. And the way to think about it is you can have all sorts of fair ways of treating people that are rule-bound, that are bureaucratic, that don't allow for good lives.
Yeah.
So what I want to say is you have to include in any kind of moral, I call it moral order, the capacity to have a good life. Not just treat others fairly, but to promote good lives for people. And that, it seems to me, is important. And that's where we get moral distinctiveness. What's a good life for you, Paul, might not be the same thing as a good life for me. And we're going to have some moral differences then, if that's the case. And that's all right. We can work through moral differences. We can find ways of living through them. But if you just look for fairness, rule following, I think you end up taking away good lives from most people. And I don't want to do that.
Yeah. So I've worked with many startups and companies from, less than $1 million to 50 million plus pretty much in my career. Currently, between 5 and 10 smaller organizations. And one of the problems that I see with is onboarding. When they bring someone on, there's training, and it's what I call it organic. There's an organic evolution of how a person just kind of naturally learns the rules of the land, because in many cases those smaller businesses don't have a roadmap. They don't have written. They might have a mission statement, but it's tucked away somewhere, or might be on a sign somewhere. But how do you implement it, and how do you uh, assimilate's probably not the right word, but how do you indoctrinate, or how do you bring someone on board, and so that they learn what the moral compass of the company is, and how to do things in the way that has been defined for that company, so that they have better lives. And everyone's at a different place, depending on if they're just starting out, or if they're mid-career, or if they're towards our age. They have different perfect lives. Mine is more freedom. Other people might be, I'm really interested in making the money to support my growing family. So how do you it's a tough question to ask, but how do you approach the onboarding process so that we can all be aligned?
Yeah, no, and to me, I don't work so much on the onboarding process. I work on the process immediately after the onboarding process.
Okay.
That's not to, I mean, it's not exactly true. I was just at the end of the last engagement I was doing for that healthcare company. We were focusing on the onboarding process, but it was really to let everybody know what's coming next. So, and what's coming next is what I call when you're running a business from small to large, it's important to figure out what your signature practices are. And signature practices are the practices that bring the look and feel of your culture. We say the mood and style, but look and feel is good enough for now. And I always say, people can be inventive and can invent lots of different signature practices. At Pixar, the famous signature practice is their kind of board meeting, where all the directors meet together and offer evaluations of other people's works. But I say there are 4 basic practices that you're going to have in any organization. You're going to have a handoff practice, particularly between units. So you're asking somebody to do something. You've done something, please do the next step. You're going to have an informal evaluation practice. That worked really well. That was a really good piece of work. That wasn't such a good piece of work. That needs to be finished. You're going to have a decision-making practice, which is really vital, important. How do we make decisions around here? Do we try to get a consensus? Do we have decision makers? Do we have people advising decision makers, and so forth? How do we do that? And you're going to have a celebration practice. Who gets celebrated for what?
Love that.
And when do they do that? If you design those 4 practices in the way that's distinctive to your company, those practices will determine what the culture is like and will convey to people the nature of the company. So for instance, handoff practices, I advise my clients, first of all, to ask for promises. If you're requesting something, if you're handing something off to somebody, make a request that they promise you to get it done at a certain time, at a certain quality. I like things that explicit. A lot of people want to have more of an assembly line. We can see if it's more of an assembly line with lots of rules and procedures, it's a totally different company than if you have a promise. And then even within promise making, there's the whole thing of how do they co-design the promise? I can't do it that way, but I could do it this way. And you can have different co-design practices that will give you a slightly different culture. So if you just take those 4 different practices I mentioned, the handoff, the decision-making is the richest one, by the way. The celebration and the evaluation practice. How often do you whenever anybody turns in a piece of work, do you give them an evaluation then? If you do, you're going to move towards a company with a lot of zeal and energy. If you don't, it's going to be more casual company, and your enemy's going to be laziness then. So those practices are quite different. So I like focusing on those 4 practices and designing them in particular so that it conveys what the style of the company is, and doing them coherently. And when a leader does that for a small or large company, that is really a lot like writing the novel of the company. You are you're saying how your characters are going to act at these critical places in the company that are also places where the company makes money. If handoffs go poorly, you lose money. If people are not making decisions or the decisions are not clear, you lose money. If people don't know what to celebrate, people don't know what to work for, you lose money. If people aren't giving evaluations, people then are not doing the kind of work you want them to do, and you're losing money. So those are all four practices critical to making money, critical to designing your culture. And
Interesting.
so the onboarding is, look at how we make decisions here. This is how we think we make decisions here. Look at how we do handoffs here. This is how we think we make it, and report back to us if we don't, and get people into those. I mean, obviously you have to onboard people with the salary, when it's salary paid, and all that other stuff. But in conveying the nature of the company, I focus on those four practices.
Well, I've always been involved in and very interested in operations. I get this from my dad. He was a brilliant doctor, yet he had a business degree, and he was very innovative in the way that he approached treatment of his patients, and it was very systematic and very human, personalized. And what I was getting to was, in an organization that I work with, they have salespeople, sales department, and they gather the requirements from the customer, whatever they might. In this case, it's art. Their requirements for their art, and then they pass that off to they pass what they think the customer wants to the artist, who's going to design the thing that they were told to do. And then there's a little bit of back and forth, but that process, that handoff process, is pretty impersonal. It's via email, even though they're in the same building. It's via email, and there's one of the organizations has a lot of rules. The art department has a lot of requirements that pushes back to the salespeople, who then have to go back to the customer. And I know that's costing money. That's costing the company money. And I was just wondering how we could implement something that was more effective, but yet still efficient, because it is a production environment. You know, the art they're doing production art. And then that gets handed off to a factory that creates the widget that we're making. So what would you suggest in that way?
Okay, I'll do some consult. I normally like to talk to people and observe things more closely, but you gave a pretty compelling description. And there are two things. I think for that, well, I'll give you the two answers, and you can tell me which is more appropriate. One is, it has to be a conversation, a spoken conversation, I would say. And you'll get rid of all sorts of downstream slowness and messiness if you do that, where the artist in that conversation repeats back to the salesperson what the artist is hearing from the salesperson. It's a kind of active listening thing. I try to take it a little bit further than active listening. The artist doesn't just repeat back, but the artist says, "This is my interpretation. Does this make sense?" And so they collaborate in the handoff. And that would be the first thing I would suggest there. And I believe you'll get things moving much more quickly. You'll get far fewer mistakes, and you'll have much better relationships, and then communication will get better and better and better. I remember I was working with an insurance company where the insurance company had the brilliant idea of saying the people that actually determine the calculations, the underwriters, are going to talk directly with the brokers, who are the people selling insurance. And they set that up, and it just wasn't working. Well, why isn't it that the underwriters love being right and saying what they believe is true? The brokers love creating friendships and creating relationships. We taught the brokers a little bit of friendship language, and suddenly relations were going much better. They were selling much more insurance, and things were great. So that would be the first step I would get. Get the minimum back and forth so the artist really understands what the salesperson saw. And what the salesperson saw probably can't be simply enumerated in this, and this.
It can't be bullet pointed. No,
Yeah, it
it's a
can't.
discussion,
Yeah.
which I've always thought would be the best way to do it. But
And
it
then,
takes time.
but it doesn't take that. Compared to the time that you're losing on the back end where things are not right, where customers are not happy, where there's confusion, I can guarantee you, you will not lose time. You will gain time. In fact, in my experience, I wouldn't say you're going to gain 20% time, but you're going to gain at least 5% time by taking the time earlier. Now, if you want something that's more creative, you have the the salesperson talk to the artist, have the artist think through what the artist would spec and do, and have the artist describe that then to the salesperson, and have them go back and forth at the next higher level of the design, not just what do you understand, what do you understand.
Mhm.
I think that, I don't know exactly the art, but those would be my two immediate solutions there for how to handle that handoff. And it's really in the level of co-design. And you'll have two different companies based upon that level of the back and forth in the initial request.
Yeah, when I first started working with the company or was aware of them as a consultant, they had one designer and 4 or 5 salespeople, and everything was hand drawn. It was drawn and then photocopied, and not the technology we have today. Back then, they did have conversations, but when I started working with that company full time, there was always the art department complaining that the salespeople didn't give them what they needed, and the salespeople were complaining that they didn't get it on time. So we developed a process that would measure on time, but the mission of the art department is quality art on time, quality production art on time. But they're doing the HAL 9000, the Space Odyssey 2001.
Yep.
They're on time, but there's a lot of revisions. And then the art department wants to reduce the revisions, so they've made all these rules, which pushes back on the salespeople. And then the salespeople are pissed off,
Yep.
At the art department, and they go around the process. And so there isn't they don't answer the phone in the art department. So there's a huge breakdown in communication.
Wow.
And I would love to see that transform. So I'll bring that up to them and to see what they think about it. I know there'll be a lot of pushback, and they say, "Oh, that'll never work." There's no time. There's no time to do it.
Okay, well, that's where I would, if I were with you shoulder to shoulder, that's where I would tell you my insurance case. In fact, we can go public, but it's the RSA insurance. You get them to take the time to build the relationship, and not only do you sell much more, you sell much more quickly. So, in fact, in that case, when we got underwriters speaking to brokers that way, and this was in the UK, we ran our pilot in August. You probably see where I'm going.
Yeah.
We had a 90% improvement in profits.
Wow.
Okay, I'm an American from the US. I was completely defeated by that, because if I could have gotten them to take a few less days of summer vacation, I could have said 100%.
Yeah.
I knew that it was right. It was just within, but in Europe, your August vacation's pretty sacred. If I had said that, don't take the vacation, I probably would have thrown out. But no, but the numbers where you get good conversations are really, when it comes to profit, when it comes to productivity, the numbers when you get done with it are huge. And you're starting to build a culture where people like each other. Right now, you have people setting up rules, which you just described is a beautiful peer culture where everybody is setting up rules to blame the other person.
Yeah.
The rules that the art department set up, the rules that the sales department set up are so that they can find someone to blame when things go late. And everybody is assuming that things are going to go late. And it's all because they're not having the initial upfront conversation.
Yeah.
Now
the good news is that the company is growing. It's coming back from COVID, which,
Good.
it nearly, really hurt that company. But the company is growing, and the art department's 98% on time, very, very regularly. So that's really good. And a lot of that 2%, and they're like 20 to 30% early on most things, or a lot of things. But that little anomaly is going back is part of the rules that are made that take the extra time to go back to the customer to say, no, you've got to submit it this way, which I know loses business. We're not measuring that, but we should be.
And by the way, if they're 98% on time with the processes that you described, I would suggest that what counts as on time is too slow to begin with. They could be going much faster with better conversations, and they could be more productive that way. What they've done is they've jiggled the rules to accept lower productivity, probably lower quality, and get more agreement.
Well, the quality is good. The quality is very good.
Okay.
And so, because we have some really talented people, and the company has very tenured people. They've been there for decades, some of them. So that's the good news. But the bad news is there's still, as we hand off the company, I'm part of management in that group. As we hand off to the future, what's going to happen to that company if we don't make some changes to help it be more resilient, and how can we turn it into a masterpiece?
Yeah.
So what else have we covered? We've gone a lot. We've gone all over the place, but I've really enjoyed this conversation. I guess one of the questions that you had on your list is, do you have to be a CEO or a division leader to lead in this way? And I think we answered that, but do you want to unpack that any further?
Well, actually, yeah. Let me say a few things. I spoke about signature practices. I think designing the signature practices for your unit, that's certainly possible. I don't know that you have to go up to the CEO to take the company you're working with, get the head of the art department, get the head of the sales department to say, what's the practice going to be where things go great? How do we get together, or how do we revise? What's our practice for revising our practices so that we're continuously improving, and get them to develop something that's widely seen throughout the company. You don't have to be the CEO to do that. Yeah. But I want to say the basic skills that I like people to develop so that they can do the higher level skills, so they can have the courage to take the moral risk to solve an anomaly. And I'll come back to those three elements again. But the first one is, how do you build trust? Because in order to get people to do things they're stretching themselves, in order for people to follow you, if you're breaking the rules a little, you have to have a lot of trust. And the way most people say that the way you build trust is you're reliable. You do what you say you're going to do, and that's it. If you do that enough times, you'll have trust. I don't think that trust is rich enough and it's thick enough. I think we trust people because we see in them virtues we admire. Do people see in you virtues that they admire? And if they don't, how do you make them do that? Now, I go through steps about how to do that. I say, you got to tell your foundational story. What's the story that made you who you are? Then what are the virtues in that story? Are people seeing that? Or when you tell people the story, are they saying, oh my God, I never saw you that way. You're a completely different person. Most of the time in most businesses, when I have people share their foundational story, even with a team they've been working with, it is an oh my God moment. I never knew that about you. This is a problem, that people don't really manifest their virtues. My virtue is I'm an explainer. I think probably all your viewers and listeners have got that. That's you want an explainer? Well, Charles Spinoza is one of those that they'll say. So I try to manifest it. I want leaders up and down to begin manifesting virtues, because that way they build trust. If the virtue is going to be important in delivering whatever you need delivered, and they have that virtue, you're going to trust them. The second thing that I want leaders to do is listen to hear how people and customers are different from them. And this is a little bit beyond just listening empathetically. This is beyond just putting yourself in the shoes of the other. This is asking, why would the other see something wrong with you? And then navigating that. I mean, the simplest case of that is you think of Amazon. I mean, the Amazon engineers created this great online system so that you could purchase virtually anything at a lower price than you could at any time. You could find it easily on your screen. And of course, you had to wait for the mail to come to you once you purchased it. Now, for all the techies who created this great online system, I think they thought that was great. And the wait that you would have to take to have for the thing to come to you, well, that's just part of all the, the benefits of this model. But Bezos looked at his customers and said, how are they going to see things differently from me and my techies? And he saw they're going to be upset by this wait time. And so he's done everything he could in his power, and following leaders have too, to cut that wait time down to as close to zero as possible and to make returns very easy. That's listening for difference. When you do that, one of the funny things I do when I talk to my clients, what do you think is the best thing about Amazon? Most of them say the easy return policy and the speed by which things come. They're not saying anymore the basic business model, virtually everything online at a lower price. Nobody's saying that anymore, at least to me. So
and you know what else they have is they have analytics, and so they know that this item that you're about to order is highly returnable. It's returnable most often. And so, and what does that mean to you? You better check out the specs and make sure it fits your model, because you're going to waste time. So that's another time saver for the customer, which I think is really helpful. And it's come true a number of times when I've ordered something, is, gosh, that's not really what I wanted. And I returned it and they took it back happily, but they make it a little more difficult, I think. To return things that are highly returnable.
They're constantly adjusting, and that's the thing. They're listening for. So that's a second skill I want people to develop. Trust building. Listen, those are two primary things. Once you do, because actually it takes courage to enact those skills, and that's what I want. The other basic thing that I talk about is telling truth to power. For managers.
What does that mean?
It means basically, if you see something, first of all, it means seeking truth. What is true about my customers? What is true about my employees? What is true about my organization? What is true about my owners? Asking that question, what do other people not see that I can see, and constantly engaging in that exploration. That, by the way, is exploration that will lead to a moral anomaly, to finding a moral anomaly. There's something really odd here. There's no right thing to do in this circumstance. That's an anomaly.
That was the third thing that you were going to mention, was finding the moral anomaly.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, once you find moral anomalies, then you're listening for difference, you're building trust, and you've got some courage. You're moving outside the line. So and that truth seeking, saying truth to power, means telling this is your Bezos is being right to be expecting to be misunderstood some of the time. Saying to people who don't want to hear something that's important for them to hear. And without that, you're not going to be able to turn your company to a masterpiece. You're not going to take the steps to do that. With that, if you do it wisely, and I write in the book about how to compose how you're going to say this, you can advance your company and advance it very well. So those are the kinds of basic skills I try to get people getting, so that they can step up to identifying moral anomalies and then coming up with ways to resolve them.
Right. And so I was going to ask you, what were the three things that people could do? Those are the three things. Could you just bullet point them for me?
Yeah, I'm going to give you two other things. Let me bullet point them for you. One is the same, the foundational story. What is your foundational story? How did you become the person that you are? And tell it as a story. What were you like before? What challenge did you face? how did you overcome the challenge? And then stand back from the thing and say, what virtues did I show in overcoming that challenge? Those are the virtues that are key to you. And then you can tell your foundational story to other people. If they're saying, oh, wow, you're different, well, then you know that you're not manifesting those virtues. So
Right.
figure out how to manifest those virtues.
Yeah.
The other thing is, the thing I talk to leaders about, but you can go down in the organization, what always goes wrong here? I mentioned that question earlier. That for me is a really fundamental question in my consulting. Managers are taught to work around what always goes wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying what always goes wrong that if you addressed, you would have a better company.
Yeah.
And then, and as I told you, Paul, to my surprise, most leaders can answer that. You go into a workshop. When I first started doing this, I thought it would take a day to get them able to answer that. It took like 2 hours.
Yeah.
You know, they'd write some things down, talk them over, and bam, they'd have something. The next one, this is the hard, and I got this one wrong too. When I first came up with this question, I thought, this will take maybe an hour in a workshop. But this is the hard one. Now that you know what always goes wrong, what would you love to happen?
Yeah.
Ask that question. That is, I mean, it sounds very easy, and I assume your listeners and viewers are thinking, oh, that's very easy. Surprise yourself. It is actually not so easy to answer that question. You tend, if you're an experienced manager, to answer, what can I make happen? What can I make happen that's different? What would I love to happen for the customers, for the owners, for the employees? Well, your first answer is, first of all, that's ridiculous. Then you'll answer something that's just impossible. What within the realm of possibility would you love to happen? That's the hard question to answer, but I encourage your viewers and listeners to ask those 3 questions. Those are my 3 bullet points. What's your foundational story? What always goes wrong here? What would you love to make happen?
Yeah, I love that. You know, that reminds me of the Dan Sullivan question. You know, imagine a year from now, we're having this conversation and things went, what would have happened had to have happened to have this, the thing that you wanted in the first place. And which is just what you so eloquently put and condensed that into how would you love to have it happen or have it be? Which is a great way to put it. And I like to ask that question, because if you can get people to get out of their own way, another method that I use is called mind storming, which is like brainstorming, but it can be done solo or it can be done in a group. And I learned this from Brian Tracy. And you ask a question like that: what would you love? How would you love to have things to be? And you write down 20 answers to that question. And the first few answers are going to be, real simple, stupid, but don't qualify, don't judge the answers to your question. Answers 10 through 20 are going to be really difficult to answer, but that's where the gold is. And that's where you'll find that, once you've done this exercise, you can qualify and say, wow, I had never thought of putting in a drive-through at my Burger King, but they did it. They did it because the banks were doing it. But that's where you can use your brain to build power in your brain so that you can answer questions like that, which is a great exercise. And then you rinse and repeat, do that again and say, okay, well, here's the idea. How can I implement that? Well, here's 20 ways that I could do it, and so on and so on. So that's how I teach people how to come up with great ideas to answer those difficult questions that sounds like an easy question, like you say, but it's not as easy.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And I'm sure what you do also is fight off the naysayers. As soon as people come up with an answer, there are a lot of people jumping on board to explain why it's impossible.
Well, and that's why you set the rule to say you can't qualify. The moment somebody says, especially in a mastermind group or a situation, when someone says, have you ever thought of this? Or this probably wouldn't work. I don't know if you've ever thought of this, but have you tried this? Usually that's something from someone who has no knowledge of whether it's possible for you or not. That could be the answer of a lifetime, or the idea of a lifetime that you've never considered because you're in the forest,
Yep.
For the
Yep.
trees.
Exactly.
So thank you. It's been a pleasure to have you, Charles. I've really enjoyed our conversation. You've mentioned your book a couple of times, and so can you tell us a little bit about your book, what the title is, how to get it, and also how to connect with you?
Yeah, thank you. Okay, I'm going to show the book. The title is Leadership as Masterpiece Creation, and then the subtitle is a little bit long, invented by the publisher. What business leaders can learn from the humanities about moral risk-taking.
Mm-hmm.
As I say, Phil Laughlin, my editor, came up with that subtitle. I like the fact that it brings in the humanities and so forth. So I'm moderately happy with that. But this is the book. The easiest place to get it, I think, is Amazon, although it is in some bookstores. Barnes and Noble had it for a while. I think might still. But Amazon's the easiest place to go if you don't mind using Amazon. For me, I'm on LinkedIn. That's the easiest place to get to me. LinkedIn in Charles Spinoza. Sometimes I hyphenate my name, and that seems to get there the fastest. And I appreciate any inquiries at all. I'm pretty diligent about answering.
For sure. Connect with Charles, and it's Charles Spinoza, Spinosa, and you'll be able to link in the show notes when you find this episode on your favorite podcast network or on our website, leadmachinegrowthshow.com. You'll find his episode up there. And as we sign off, remember, faith and action go hand in hand. So keep the pedal to the metal. Until next time on the Lead Machine Growth Show, I'm Paul Guyon and Charles Spinoza. Thank you so much, my brother, for your insights into creating a masterpiece of an organization. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you for tuning in to the Lead Machine Growth Show with Paul Guyon, where we show you how to tackle your tech, master your message, and design your dream so that you can transform your vision into reality. Remember to visit our website at www.leadmachinegrowthshow.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on the Lead Machine Growth Show.